America has had a worldwide reputation for being the capital of capitalism. But is it anymore? It seems that the vitality and independence of our once free market economy has fallen into the quicksand of government regulation, astronomical spending and taxation, as well as pessimism and sluggishness. Today, I am so pleased to welcome George Gilder, best-selling author and economist, to discuss this question addressed in his newest book, Life After Capitalism. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Timeless. I hope that you're having a great week. Just a reminder to hit the subscribe button down below so that you can stay notified every time I post a Julie Noted news video or a Timeless episode. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Julie R. Hartman. Now, those of you who have been listening to this show for a while know that I am a big history nerd. I majored in history in college. And whenever I do Timeless episodes, it seems that all avenues lead back to history. I don't consider myself to be particularly well-versed in economics, but then I read a book, Life After Capitalism, which of course is the book written by the author who I am so thrilled to have on the show today, George Gilder. And within that short read, I now feel like I am an expert on economics. It's a credit to his great writing and how easy it is to understand even for people who are not well-versed in economics. And he really transformed my understanding of the way capitalism works. Again, I am so thrilled to welcome him today. George Gilder is a prolific author and economist. His 1981 book, Wealth and Poverty, was hugely influential to President Ronald Reagan. It actually influenced his supply-side economics and capitalism during the early months of his administration. In fact, Mr. Gilder was President Reagan's most quoted living author. Mr. Gilder is also the author of Life After Google, The Fall of Big Data and the Rise of the Blockchain Economy. And he also writes several books not pertaining to economics. He's the author of The Israel Test, Naked Nomads, Sexual Suicide, and Man and Marriage, a true Renaissance man and thinker. Hello, Mr. Gilder. Thank you so much for coming onto the program.
Delighted to be here.
We will have to do subsequent episodes when we go through each of these other books that you've written, especially The Israel Test. I told you that my dear friend, co-host, and mentor, Dennis Prager, with whom I do a podcast, quotes The Israel Test many times on our program. So I look forward to speaking about that with you. But let's focus today on your newest book. You just published it on May 30th, Life After Capitalism. Your central hypothesis, which I found to be so revelatory, as I said, is that wealth is knowledge and the creation of information. I learned that the creation of wealth was made through incentives of people in the workforce or through pumping money into the economy. But again, you say that it's knowledge. Can you explain that for us?
Well, Thomas Sowell said it all 50 years ago in Knowledge and Decisions. The Neanderthal in his cave had all the physical resources we have today. The difference between our age and the Stone Age is entirely the expansion of knowledge. And that is, we have to escape the physics envy that Adam Smith brought to economics. This was Adam Smith's great error. He had all sorts of luminous and true insights, but his great error was to model economics on physics, as he saw the economy as a great machine. And the economy is not a great machine. It's an expression of human creativity in the image of our creator.
Yes, you write, when you insert your credit card into the gas pump, what you're really buying is the knowledge that makes that transaction possible. That is so well said. You don't think about that you are investing in or purchasing the creation of knowledge, the pumps and the drills and all of the mechanisms that made that possible. So in order to perpetuate and create more wealth, you need to create more and more knowledge.
No. And more people yield more wealth. Population is not a burden on the planet. Population creates resources. It doesn't consume resources. Resources are abundant, the atoms in the universe. What transforms the atoms in the universe into what we call wealth is knowledge. And knowledge unfolds over time. And the real scarce resource is time. When you run out of money, what you're really doing is running out of the time to earn more money. Money is really best considered a measurement of the passage of time, which is what remains scarce when everything else becomes abundant.
What are the greatest contributors to knowledge?
Knowledge is a product of learning, and learning is really Popperian learning. That is, as Karl Popper said, propositions are not truly demonstrable unless they're falsifiable, unless there's some way that they can be refuted or rejected. And the reason capitalism works is it's a uniquely fruitful process of learning where experiments are conducted by businesses and their outcomes are measurable against the passage of time through the willingness of consumers to spend their time earning money to purchase your goods and services, which is your time.
Right. So knowledge is created through invention. And you talk about how, of course, capital is needed to invest in certain inventions. And that's why so many upper class wealthy people are the ones who are able to invest their money because they have money to lose. So really the central thing here, or one of the central things to the creation of wealth, the perpetuation of knowledge, is having the capital to fund those experiments, if you will. And what you say, it very logically, is that spending produces very little knowledge because it keeps you right in place. You're spending on things that already exist instead of investing in new things that could possibly exist. So all of these taxes and government regulations and hampers on the way you spend your money impede the creation of new information. Is that a fair characterization of your argument?
That is a fair characterization of my argument. And we've previously talked about Paul Volcker.
Yes, all fair.
And Paul Volcker really effectively restored the dollar to the gold standard under Reagan. That wasn't how he explained what he was doing, but that was in fact what he did by his drastic monetary policies that ended up raising the interest rates to 18% and thus halting this inflation that was engulfing our economy in the 1970s and early 80s. And today we're using monetary policy. The central banks are using monetary policy to steal from the future in order to fund the projects of politicians. And this is a great hypertrophy of finance that is engulfing the world economy today, and it really destroys the meaning of money. Money is no longer a measuring stick, parceled out in the remorseless and rigorous passage of time. It's a magic wand for politicians to pursue foolish goals like controlling the tides and controlling the climate and declaring emergencies. Emergency socialism is really the regime that prevails most widely.
Yes, I want to get to your argument about emergency socialism, but first, because we're talking about the government transformation of monetary policy, that we are just spending and spending and spending on, as you said, these reckless projects. It's amazing, they just raised the debt ceiling, and I just look at this and I go, how is it possible that we can just keep printing and printing and printing more money? It seems that money doesn't have any value anymore. As you say, it's no longer a measuring stick. When did all of this craziness start, by your judgment? This new era we're in of capitalism.
I believe that it's a mistake to focus too much on, ironically, too much on spending or the creation of debt or all these excesses that are obvious today. All this debt could conceivably be redeemed if entrepreneurs were pursuing the best projects and most creative inventions and most exciting frontiers of innovation. But today, instead, they're dominated by a model of sustainability, which is another way of saying a static planet, a stagnant global economy, an economics dominated by scarcity. And there's a book that recently came out. I wrote the introduction to it, called Superabundance. And really, we live in an age of superabundance. And the only thing that's scarce really is time. And politicians are rebelling against time to steal from the future to pursue just completely ludicrous goals like King Canute controlling the planet and controlling the climate.
Mm-hmm. What are some examples of the emergency socialism that you say has come to infect our government? I assume the COVID emergency would be one of them. Well, first, can you define what emergency socialism is, and then can you please provide some examples?
Emergency socialism is essentially the politicians in consultation with elites pursuing goals that have no roots in actual real experiments in the global economy, that are ideological distractions, like climate change. The climate has always changed. There's no sign of any unusual changes in the climate. It's this whole economy and our whole energy system is being grossly distorted, and in order to pursue this quixotic error that Al Gore propounded 20 years ago with a mistake in his graph of the path of CO2 and its relationship to the weather. And it's just kind of, but COVID was another similar kind of crisis where there wasn't a massive demand of people around the world to have lockdowns and wear masks and close schools and mandate vaccinations that were irrelevant for young people. And, it was just, and which actually were destructive to young people. The whole kind of policy engine has run off the tracks. It's now serving the interests and of elites for more power. In other words, wealth is knowledge is being negated by the pursuit of power by politicians around the world. And our politicians are some of the worst in the world by that measure. And that's why it's a very, although Europe is in a similar predicament, but that's why it's a crisis today and why we're in a phase of life after capitalism. But we also are in an age of phenomenal opportunity. I write about graphene in my book, a transformative new material that can have as revolutionary an impact on economics, on our economic possibilities, as the rise of silicon did in the early 80s when I wrote several books about the microchip and fiber optics and became what a futurist, predicting the smartphone. It would be as portable as your watch, as personal as your wallet. It would recognize speech. It would navigate streets. It would collect your news and your mail. Just might not do Windows. This was my 1990 book, Life After Television, which I referred to in Life After Google.
What is capitalism supposed to look like?
It's supposed to be governed by a science that is really prevailing in the world today in industry. It's called information theory. And information theory declares that information is surprise. It's unexpected things. And it's what Claude Shannon of MIT in 1948 defined as entropy. It's unexpected developments. And in order to have a creative economy full of unexpected bounties, full of surprisal, you need to have a low entropy carrier, a system of constitutional rules and regulations that render government predictable. So you have a low entropy carrier that can bear high entropy discoveries and developments. And that's really the theme of Life After Capitalism. I explain how information theory gives the foundations for a successful capitalism that transcends this early mistake of the materialist superstition, the economics of scarcity and emergency socialism.
So to play devil's advocate for a moment, I'm imagining there might be some who are listening who say, well, okay, maybe we need to give people more capital, get out some of the barriers to open businesses, invest in this new creation of information. But what about redistributing money to those who were not given many opportunities? What other ways are those who are low income going to be able to climb the economic ladder and get to the place where they can have capital to invest in new information? What would be your response to those people who have that wonder?
Well, capitalism is, of course, made possible the most awesome increase in the standard of living of poor people all around the world in the last 50 years in the history of the world. This has been an effect of capitalist creativity, overcoming poverty. Poverty used to be always with us. We took poverty for granted through most of the history of the human race. When the number of people was a tenth or less the number that today, and and the whole dream of redistribution is really based on a static illusion. You redistribute capital and you destroy its value, because capital is only meaningful when it's joined with knowledge, with the actual experimental processes that businesses conduct in overcoming the challenges on the frontiers of our economy. So it's the whole redistribution model is based on a static economy and an economics of scarcity. And we're actually in an economics of abundance that's being suppressed by the capricious governments pursuing the notion of sustainability and as human beings as somehow burdens on the planet rather than redeemers of the planet, as consumers of resources rather than producers of them, as mouths alone rather than minds.
That's an important note, that the redistributing is a more favorable course of action in a stagnant economy. And also, it appears to me that the best anti-poverty remedy is a thriving economy. But I'd like to turn for a moment to another part of your book where you talk about the lack of creativity and faith in the future among the populace now, which are two key ingredients in keeping the economy going. Can you say more about that?
Well, I think that that the whole sort of globalist establishment that dominates the universities, places like Harvard, are afflicted with this view that somehow human beings are burdens on the planet rather than saviors of the planet and creative in the image of their creator. This is because creativity always comes as a surprise to us. We have to be open to the future. We have to have faith in the future in order to realize our bounties. If we assume a static economy and a planet of scarcity, if we probably won't support the new inventions and adventures on the frontiers of knowledge, the learning that actually produces new wealth. You can only keep what you give away. You have to be willing to give away your resources to others in order to to keep them. If you, the Midas story, you know, King Midas, who turned everything to gold
Yes.
until he couldn't eat, is the fundamental reality of economics. Economics depends on faith in others, collaboration with others, response to the needs of others, entrepreneurial anticipation of the future.
I have this saying that if 300 people are on an airplane and every single one of those 300 does not think that the airplane is going to take off, as long as the airplane has the right equipment, the right piloting, the right weather, it doesn't matter if all 300 don't believe that plane will take off, it will take off. The economy is the exact opposite. You need, as you just said, to believe that it is going to work. The economy is built on trust, as you said, in faith in others, in collaboration. You have to be able to trust that your investments are being protected, that what you're buying is a good item, that your hard work and the capital that you build, you will be able to keep for yourself. And I was struck by the way that you wrote in your book that sense of faith and trust is rapidly diminishing. So it appears that there are these two twin problems. One of them is the ESG and the emergency socialism and the government spending and regulation and taxation. And then the other part of it is that people are no longer, because of those problems, trusting in the economy that they're engaging in.
Well, that's true about the United States. It's true about American university system to a great extent, but still, all around the world, the entrepreneurs continue to create new technologies. And the one I focus on in Life After Capitalism is graphene, is a single layer of carbon atoms that is 200 times stronger than steel, 1,000 times more conductive than copper, so thermally conductive that you mix it with asphalt and you don't get any potholes. You mix it with concrete and you can use a third less concrete to get the same structural effects. It transmits signals so accurately that you insert it in a spinal cord, a severed spinal cord, and the spinal cord will refuse itself. Until recently, this was discovered in 2004, but just 2 or 3 years ago, James Tour, a professor at Rice University, discovered with his student Dewey Long, from a Vietnamese immigrant, discovered a way to produce graphene, perfect ribbons of graphene, by the ton in volume, and turned graphene from a scarcity that could only be used in a few exotic applications to an abundant resource for a new carbon age.
Wow.
It's an amazing development. It's just the last 2 or 3 years. And the reason it's taking off is because venture capitalists in Israel adopted Tour's technology massively. So about 14 out of the leading 18 companies from Tour's laboratory over the last 3 or 4 years are in Israel.
Wow. Well, that actually segues nicely into my final question for you. As I said at the outset, you are a Renaissance author. You've written books on male-female relations, marriage, Israel, as you just said, and of course, economics. If there is one other book of yours that my audience should read besides Life After Capitalism, which I will say everyone in my audience should read, what would that book be?
I think The Israel Test is a crucial book, and it's deeply relevant today because it shows that Israel is really a test of the world economy. And the question is how you respond. The Israel test is how you respond to people who excel you in inventiveness, creativity, and wealth. Do you envy them and try to tear them down like much of the world does today, faced with the prodigious achievements of Israel? Or do you admire them and emulate them and learn from them and thus expand your own possibilities? And so I think the Israel test at the moment is an absolutely vital issue for the world economy. And much of the world, or the whole UN, is in a snit of envy and petty resentment toward Israel. And the Israel test explains why Israel is a critical force in the U.S. economy, as Jim Tour having to go to Israel to get his inventions in Houston fully adopted. The Israelis adopted them. They understood their value. And so there are now 14 companies in the last couple of years launched in Israel to pursue Jim Tour's technology. But his central company is called Universal Matter, and it emerged in Houston and Toronto. So entrepreneurs rise up all over the world, and we have to embrace the entrepreneurs of the world in order to transcend emergency socialism and realize the promise of our global information economy, the surprises of human creativity that continue to happen around the world.
I'm smiling because Dennis writes in his wonderful Torah commentary in the Cain and Abel story, where Cain's brother Abel offers a better sacrifice to God, and Cain kills his brother, perhaps not intentionally. He meant to harm him in some way, but probably not kill him. Nevertheless, Cain kills his brother. And Dennis writes this great explanation of that chapter that you just said. You literally just said it. What do you do when someone does better than you? Do you envy them, or do you seek to emulate them? People nowadays do not have the wisdom to know how to deal with envy, whether it's in brotherly relations or in entrepreneurial matters, economic growth, people doing better than others in that realm. So I think you just said that very well, and it reminded me of that story. I will certainly be reading The Israel Test, and I would love to talk about it with you sometime. I very much enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, Mr. Gelder, for coming on to Timeless.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all so much for joining me. As a reminder, you can hit the subscribe button down below, and I will see you very soon for more episodes of Timeless. Take care.